They waited for the sea to breathe. When the tide pulled in, the river wore a smooth, innocent face. When it exhaled, a forest rose from the water, iron-tipped stakes, rows upon rows, like fangs from the throat of the earth. On that day, two empires sailed into a trap they could not see, and Vietnam wrote its victory with wood, water, and time. This is Bạch Đằng, the river that swallowed invaders twice. Bạch Đằng, forest of spears beneath the tide. If you spread a map of northern Vietnam on the table, trace your finger from the Gulf of Tonkin inland, you'll find the Bạch Đằng River, winding through low, muddy flats and mangrove edges, a watery maze where sea and land trade places, hour by hour. Here, the tides are not a background detail. They are the clock that rules everything. Fishing boats rise, fields gleam, channels rearrange themselves, and anyone who thinks the river is simple has already made their first mistake. For centuries, this estuary has been a gate, the maritime door to the Red River Plain and the heartlands beyond. To control it is to choose who may pass and who must kneel. Empires from the north coveted that gate. Fleets came with banners and drums, but Bạch Đằng has a particular way of welcoming guests. It teaches them to respect the tide. Before we speak of battles, understand the weapon. Not a sword, not a bow, but a stake, carved from hardwood, sharpened, sometimes banded or tipped with iron. Each stake was a quiet sentence in a long, careful paragraph, driven into the riverbed at low tide, angled toward the sea, waiting. When the water rose, they vanished. When it fell, they reappeared, like the ribs of a shipwreck, like a warning written in a language only the patient could read. But stakes alone do nothing unless you know the river's breath, its timing, its hidden channels, its shifting sandbars. Bạch Đằng rewarded those who listened and punished those who only looked. The Vietnamese commanders who chose this battlefield did not use nature. They collaborated with it. They rehearsed the scene with the moon. Our story's first turning comes in the year 938, when the Southern Han sought to restore control over the lands to their south. Out on the water, sails budded like white flowers, a fleet heavy with confidence and command. On shore, a man watched the tide charts not with ink, but with memory. His name, Ngo Quyen. Ngo Quyen understood Bạch Đằng the way a farmer understands the seasons, and he studied the arrogance of men as closely as the pull of the moon. He knew that a fleet, once committed to a narrow river mouth at the wrong hour, would be a fleet with fewer choices than it believed. So he ordered the stakes planted in lines and thickets across the riverbed, their points aimed upstream, their bodies buried under silt. Then he waited, not for the enemy, but for the right moment to meet them. Imagine the Southern hand ships moving upriver, drums steady, oars slapping a rhythm into the muddy water, banners painting the air. They see defenders in small boats, darting, falling back. The classic invitation. Chase us, we're afraid. But the river is already whispering to those who know how to listen. The water is at its height, beginning its slow retreat. Ngo Quyen's boats yield ground, not to the invader, but to time itself, drawing the enemy further into the funnel. Then, it happens. The tide slackens. The river exhales, hull by hull. The great ships feel the bottom. A whisper of wood on hidden teeth, then a scream of fiber, a tearing, a lurch, and the stakes come alive beneath the waterline. the proud fleet, suddenly a forest of stuck birds, wings spread, unable to fly. Ngo Quyen strikes, from the flanks, from the shallows, from channels only locals dare use. His forces set upon ships that cannot turn, cannot row, cannot even face their attackers properly. Fires catch, panic spreads, river and flame do their old dance. By the time the tide reveals the stakes fully, the lesson is written in wreckage. The invaders retreat or sink, or surrender to the current. Vietnam breathes and names Ngo Quyen king. Victories fade when they are not tended, but Bach Zhang's first triumph did not fade. It hardened into practice, into stories told by boatmen, into the kind of wisdom that travels not through books, but through habits. Know the tide, said the old men to the boys. Listen to the wind before you listen to the drum, said the river to any who would command on it. For generations, the estuary waited, not sleeping, merely resting. And then, another storm gathered from the north. In the late 13th century, a name shook the earth: Mongol. From steppe to city, from the Black Sea to the China Sea. The Mongol Empire and its Yuan dynasty arm burned across maps that had once felt safe. They were not simply horsemen, they were administrators, engineers, logisticians, and they learned. Every campaign taught them new ways to crack new doors. When their ambitions looked south, toward Jai Viet, they expected another door, not a locked one. But Jai Viet in 1288 was not naive, and its guardian on water was Tran Hung Jiao, a commander who spoke in the language of patience and thunder. He inherited the lesson of Ngo Quyen, and he refined it, sculpting an entire campaign around hunger, distance, and water. Against the greatest overland empire of its age, he made the river a teacher again. A fleet is more than ships and steel. It is mouths to feed, animals to water, fires to stoke, and ropes to mend. Tran Hung Jiao understood logistics with a farmer's cruelty. He ordered his people to strip the land ahead of the invaders, to empty granaries in their path, to hide rice and boats, to turn abundance into absence. Soldiers can fight without sleep, but not without food. Armies can be brave, and still be broken by the quiet arithmetic of empty bowls. As the Yuan-Mongol forces pushed in, they found not a country to live off, but a landscape that refused to support them. Every day that passed was a coin paid to fatigue, and the river kept the receipts. Meanwhile, in the creeks and workshops of the delta, artisans shaped another forest of stakes. They cut, hardened, and ferried them on low tides, whispering through mangroves, planting them in patterns a stranger could not imagine. Some were grouped to trap the largest ships. Others shaped channels that only the defenders could navigate at speed. The stakes were not just weapons, they were choreography. When the river lowered her veil, the dance would begin. This time, the invaders were not fools. They had seen trickery before. They had heard of stakes and tides. But knowledge without intimacy is brittle. Tran Hung Jiao offered them choices that all felt reasonable, and therefore all were wrong. Light forces harried the flanks. Scouts edited the invaders' maps with rumors. Pilots defected, or pretended to, and the main Vietnamese force withdrew, always just within sight, never far enough to be safe, never close enough to be caught. The invaders' commanders looked at the tide tables, at their charts, at their orders to press and finish the campaign. Bach Jang lay ahead, a shortcut and a promise. They sailed in, morning, the tide heavy and high, the water a gleaming plain. The Vietnamese river craft skimmed the edges, thin as knives, flitting in and out of reeds like birds. The enemy's larger ships move with confidence, knowing they can ride the deeper channels. Then, defenders fall back in earnest. A retreat. Clearly, the moment has come. Arrows fly, oars dig, drums pound, but the river has its own pulse. The tide turns, almost politely, then firmly. The surface drops a hand's width, then another, then more. Here and there, a groan of wood, a sudden lean, a command shouted, a rudder that no longer bites water. The forest begins to surface, spear points glistening, rows like the smiles of crocodiles. And Tran Hung Jiao's signal rises, from hidden inlets, from side channels, from the very margins of the map. Vietnamese boats swarm. They carry fire and ropes and the confidence of home. Against trapped hulls, every small craft is dangerous, because every move it makes is chosen, while the enemy can only react. Grapples catch, flames bite, arrows fall like dry rain. The river amplifies the defenders. The stakes deny the attackers any turn, any orderly retreat, any chance to mass their strength. What courage can do, it does. Some enemy ships fight savagely. Crews spill over gunwales. Officers try to rally order, but the choreography has hardened into fate. Soon, the river is a welter of smoke and shouts, and then just the crackle of burning timbers, the hiss of water, the creak of wood dying. By evening, Bach Jang is again itself, bearing wreckage toward the sea, and memories toward legend. Nyo Quyen in 938, Tran Hung Jiao in 1288. Two triumphs that rhyme across centuries. The weapon was not simply the stake, or the fire, or the ambush. The weapon was the match between human patience and a living river. The commanders did not demand that nature obey them. They arranged so that nature would betray their enemy. When historians list the great defeats of empires, they often write of generals, of numbers, of metal. On Bach Jang, you must write of tide and mud and wood. It's tempting to imagine the stakes as a single line, but they were a garden of intent. Engineers and boatmen measured depths with poles, mapped currents with their own bodies, and marked the best places to plant teeth. The stakes were set at angles to bite hulls as they tried to turn, to hold them while the water fell, to force ships into narrower lanes that were themselves mined. At high tide, a stranger would see a broad river, a promise of easy passage. At low tide, the river bared its true face, a saw blade of wooden fangs. And remember, planting them was labor. Men worked in sucking mud, under the same skies as their fathers, moving thousands of heavy trunks with ropes and leverage and memory. This was not just a military plan. It was a community effort, a countryside arming itself not with steel, but with knowledge. Bach Jang's victories were never just the work of commanders. Village women hid rice. Boatmen buried messages through reed mazes. Blacksmiths hammered iron tips. Children carried water to the men who wrestled stakes into the earth. Fishermen taught soldiers where the bottom rose like a knuckle, where an eddy would flip a small boat if struck wrong, where a sandbar crawled each season like a slow animal. In empire's ledgers, this kind of help is invisible. On rivers, it is everything. Centuries passed. Dynasties rose and fell. the world found new weapons, gunpowder, steel hulls, maps that claimed to know everything. But rivers keep secrets well. Archaeologists and villagers alike have found remnant stakes on the Bach Jang's banks, dark wood preserved by silt, cut at angles that still look hungry. They are quiet now. Museum pieces, photographs, diagrams in books. But if you stand by the mud and close your eyes, you can hear the creak of ropes, the hush of men working, the far-off thud of drums, and the deep breath of the tide. Every nation tells stories of resistance, of cleverness against strength, of home defeating far power. Bach Jang is Vietnam's river teacher, a reminder that victory is not always a matter of more. Sometimes it's a matter of when. It says, be patient, know your ground, let the enemy commit to your clock, then close the gate. It teaches leaders to listen to fishermen and scholars to respect mud. And it shows that technology, no matter how fearsome, can be folded by environment, by culture, by the humble genius of place. Ngo Nguyen, often remembered as the founder of Vietnamese independence after centuries of domination, chose to fight on terms that negated the invaders' advantage. He could have met them in neat lines, but he chose the river's geometry. Tran Hung Jiao, a prince, a strategist, a writer of counsel to his soldiers, fused national will with hydrology. He told his men that the strength of the country lived in their hearts, but he also showed that its brain lived in the tide tables. Neither man needed the enemy to be foolish. They required only that the enemy be proud and a little hurried. On Bach Jang, haste is a sin. Step outside at night, look up, and you will see the same moon that pulled the water at Bach Jang. Its gravity tugged the sea into the river and then back out again, writing the schedule of ambushes across 1,000 mud flats. There is something beautiful and humbling in the thought that a nation's fate once swung on the quiet physics of a moonrise. War is noise, but its deepest levers can be very quiet. People living along the estuary still tell stories, not all of them strictly historical. They speak of nights when the tide fell too fast and the flats glittered with ghostly spears, of old men who could smell the moment the water would turn, of drums heard on foggy mornings when no boat was in sight. Myths are not footnotes. They are memory's poetry. They remind us that a place where so many died will always hum with something extra. Not anger, not even warning, but a presence that asks for respect. From these battles, Jai Viet kept more than land. It kept time to think, to shape a culture that would endure invasions, colonials, ideologies, and still insist on its own rhythm. It kept a story to hand to children, that home is not an abstraction. It is the precise knowledge of a channel's bend, the exact memory of when sand hardens, the sound a hull makes when it is too late to turn. Bach Jang is not a monument in stone. It is an idea in water, and ideas in water tend to travel. What does an old river ambush teach a modern world? First, that information beats force when force is blind. Second, that environment is not a backdrop. It is a participant, sometimes the protagonist. Third, that patience is not passivity. It is pressure applied over time until the hinge breaks. There are stakes beneath all our tides, in markets, in politics, in the ways we move through each day. The question is whether we know where they are and whose clock we're living on. Picture it one last time. Dawn pale over the estuary, a gull cutting the first line in the sky, the smell of salt and wet earth. At high tide, the river looks generous. It invites you to cross. At low tide, it shows its bones. Somewhere beneath, the old stakes sleep, or the memory of them does, and the water keeps telling the same story in 100 dialects of current. If you go there, stand still, let the breeze come off the gulf, and listen. You will hear it, the river breathing, in and out, and in the space between those breaths, an entire people choosing when to fight and how to win. Bach Jang did not merely drown enemies. It crowned patience, married to knowledge, sharpened by love of home. Twice the river raised a forest beneath its skin. Twice it asked invaders a simple question. Can you see what is hidden when the tide is high? History's answer, written in wrecked timbers and drifting banners, was no. And Vietnam, listening to the moon, answered with its own word, to live